Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 63.
63 is a fun number mathematically. Sorry for everybody that hates me when I talk about the numbers in math, but this one's cool, I promise.
All right.
So 63 is a unique number because in the different bases, it's a palindrome.
Okay. There's a
So-
lot of bases.
There's a lot of bases. In binary, which is base 2, it's 111-111,
Nice.
which
Very
is
good.
because the way that
Yeah.
different number systems work,
It's right before
powers
the
of
bits
2.
reset to go to
Right.
64.
Yeah, exactly. So it's 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and 32 added together is 63. Then we have base 4, it's 333, which is 3, 12, and 48 added together is 63, which is interesting but kind of related because binary and base 4, I mean, that makes sense, but still, that's just cool. It's a palindrome. And then we go to base 8, again, another power of 2, but it's also a palindrome because it's 77, which is the number 7 and 56.
Okay.
But then we skip all the way up to base 20, and now it's 33 because it's 3 and 60, which is fun. And then the last one, which is kind of dumb, is 62. In base 62, it's 1, 1 because that's 1 is just 1. And then the next one is 62, 63.
Did you come up with that? Are you the first person ever to calculate something in base 62?
I seriously doubt it.
Because why on earth would you calculate anything in base 62?
I am sure that there is an engineer out there somewhere that finds it more convenient to do certain types of math in base 62.
Well, the number 63 is also a multiple of 3, and yeah.
Good job, Ben. Good contribution.
So it's the new year, Josh. This is our first podcast recording of 2022, and it's kind of back to the grindstone. You got that feeling?
I feel like well, at least in Arizona, I feel like we're starting to relive the beginning of 2020. Like we just this week had more COVID cases than we have ever had in a single day reported ever.
Yeah, but this is the Omicron variant, so like people aren't dying from it; they're just getting sick. I got to tell you, when we got back to work at the military, it was like it was weird because I was just expecting to go back to work and start back up, maybe wear a mask in. But there was people that had gotten together for all their gatherings. Maybe they'd loosened things up more than they had at any point, and everyone caught it. Like there were kids. I got a call from the principal of my school. My daughter was exposed. I think 2 of the 4 guys that work for me had kids get exposed. There was somebody that had contracted it. There was somebody that was suspected and was getting a test. I mean, it was nuts. Pandemonium.
I work in an accounting firm that has 4 total employees, and 2 of them caught COVID Omicron over the winter break.
50% over the break.
So we
Wow.
had to shut down our firm. We had to send out a mass email saying, "Hey, we are not letting clients into the building for this calendar month. Sorry, but we all got COVID."
Wow. Huh. My wife's cousin got it. There are continuing to be deaths because of it. I mean, this is not risk-free by any means.
No, but every cloud has its silver lining, and I read an article that was very interesting to me just today. And in Quebec, they have the appointments that people are making to get their first injection for the COVID vaccine quadrupled this past week. It went from 1,500 appointments a day to 6,000 appointments a day.
Wow.
And they are attributing that to the fact that the government said that you can't go into liquor stores or cannabis sellers without a vaccination card anymore.
Well, did you see what happened at the Australian Open, the tennis tournament?
I did not. What happened there?
The world's number 1 ranked player, Novak Djokovic, had refused the vaccine but didn't comply with the Australian regulations, and he got there and they revoked his visa and deported him.
Oh, geez. That's outstanding.
This is the number 1. I don't know if it actually happened. Maybe they worked it out. But the day I read it, that was the news story, that they were preparing proceedings to deport the world's number 1 tennis player from one of the 4 annual major tournaments because he was non-compliant.
This is one of those moments that I love so much. It's one where this guy shows up and they say no, and he goes, "Do you know who I am?" And the random bureaucratic minion in front of him goes, "No, and I don't care."
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Australia has those
Excellent.
too. Good job, Australia. I don't think they've showed up on our chart of people listening yet. We got to find a way to break into that market because I like those guys.
Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do we appeal to? I'm gonna start drinking Foster's. Maybe mention that more. See if we get some traffic that way.
I have some Australian friends, but I don't know if they listen. So the back to the grindstone thing is just like the feeling of all of the differentness of the holiday season, and then back to the routine, like back to just going to work and taking the kids to school and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it was kind of there. They're like, all right, now I guess I got to go to sleep on time and eat reasonably, and I got to take life on. We'll talk about that for our feature today. But it was just, it was as expected for me. But like my seminary class, the 17 and 18-year-old kids that I teach every morning, man, they just came into my 6 a.m. class like a bunch of zombies. They're on the home stretch before they graduate from high school, and the motivation is so low. It's really hard to get them to participate in discussions.
Well, you're talking to an accountant, so January is quite literally my busiest month.
Game on.
We are now working 6 days a week. I worked half a day today. I had to go into the office this morning on a Saturday, and I sent several emails to clients asking them to clarify what they're doing. So, yeah, when you say back to the grindstone, not only is it back to the grindstone, but the RPMs are now higher than they were when I left.
Wow. Tax season. See, my wife's father was an accountant, and her brother-in-law is an accountant, so it's a whole family of that, and there's always this like family culture of avoiding tax season. Like, we can take vacations in May.
Yes, that's very much a thing. And I feel like everything in my life that I do to mess up with other people's lives comes full circle to me. For example, my wife and I got married on April 10th.
Yeah, you told this story when we interviewed you about your wedding, and your sister-in-law was an accountant, and she wasn't able to be there.
Yes, and I didn't care at the time, and now I very much care.
Yeah. Sorry, Stephanie. We'll make it up to you. So, do you feel a kinship with her now?
What do you mean?
Like, does becoming an accountant give you guys something like a special secret club you're in that nobody else is?
I don't understand what you're referring to with this whole human connection concept.
Oh, ding. I'm trying to think of an example of this. It's like when you go... I had one recently. I can't think of it.
It sounds like you're just referring to the concept that like all human relationships are built on a foundation of shared experience.
Yes, exactly. So then you have an experience, and then you have a connection with somebody that maybe you didn't have before.
Yeah, I'm a bad person for shared experience stuff like that because I don't know. I don't like other people. I don't know what to tell you. And I do talk to her. Like there are other conversations that we can have about accounting and tax stuff. But at the same time, like we're family and that's work stuff. And whenever we're together, it's never just me and her by ourselves. It's always us in a group setting where we would be the only people that had that set of shared experience. So it quickly excludes other people from the group, which is then seen as socially rude, apparently. So if we do have conversations like that, then it quickly goes into something else to be more inclusive so people don't walk away from us being nerds.
I remembered what club I recently joined. It was the old person with a bad back club.
Oh, you have a bad back too?
Well, we did what's called a personally procured move when we moved here, where basically you act as a subcontractor to the government, you move your own belongings, and then they pay you as if you were the contractor doing the work on behalf of the government.
I thought they called that the Diddy move.
Yeah. They changed it. I don't know why. They didn't like the acronym, so they had to change the acronym.
Because majors have to get promoted to lieutenant colonel, and that's the way you do it, Ben.
Redefine acronyms? Okay. So we moved here, and like the last week, I was just starting to get sore, and then whatever straw that broke the proverbial camel's back, I threw out a disc, and it was like stabbing me in my sciatica. Like I couldn't bend over, my leg hurt all the time, and it was like you see on sitcoms where the main character holds one hand in the small of their back and groans and pretends they can't pick up something off the floor.
Yeah,
that happened to me in real life, and like a light bulb turned on. I was like, "What? This is a real thing?" And then all of a sudden called to my mind all of the relatives I realized that had suffered for this, and I had all this newfound sympathy that didn't exist before.
What sympathy? That's the emotion you feel when you understand somebody else's problems?
Okay, Yeah, yes, yeah, yes, Josh. Empathy, sympathy. This is what we do here on the Bad Magic podcast. I teach you these things, and you apply them to your life. So, but what I've always tried to learn in life is the fact that when I realize I have this experience where I'm trying to empathize with other people, and then I go through the experience and I learn it, and then I build all this empathy, I can't just experience everything in order to relate to people. I got to have an analog that I can artificially put in place that accomplishes some of the same things of actually throwing my back out.
Okay.
And I've talked about it before. We have ways of referring to this. We call it giving people the benefit of the doubt or walking a mile in their shoes. Because when we say those things, we don't actually mean throw your back out so that you can understand what it's like to throw your back out. There's a whole host of things that go along with the opposite gender that we'll just never experience. So you have to have like a placeholder that you put into your mind when you're trying to tell yourself a story about someone else or relate to them or converse with them or transact with them, where you give them grace that is the unknown experience. And it should be similar to a known experience.
Okay. No. I feel like I know where you're talking about now, and I feel like this is another one of those places where you and I think fundamentally differently.
Okay.
And so
I'm glad you bridged the gap. Let's hear it.
Okay, so while you're walking around, like telling yourself these stories about other people to develop the empathy, to try to develop an analog representation in your mind that allows you to better understand your fellow man.
Yeah.
Well, that's a two-person game theory. That's the prisoner's dilemma, because you are assuming that other person is also doing the same thing towards you at all times. And the idea there being the person that doesn't gets a much larger benefit than the person that does.
Huh.
So that's where you get. That's why you would get you hear about people getting taken advantage of because they are trying to be empathetic, or they're trying to be too nice, or they're a doormat, or you're stuck holding the door open for the entire convention hall as they go out.
Yeah.
So over here, this guy, Mr. Utilitarian Selfish Narcissist, while I have the capacity to understand and tell myself a story and develop an analog simulation for the poor person in their life, I don't care, because I know they're not going to do that for me. So I'm just going to focus on my own utility and just do the best I can for me.
You're right. Those are two different quadrants in the game theory quad chart.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that would be... And occasionally you'll get a positive outcome that I wouldn't get because of that. And occasionally I'll get a positive outcome that you wouldn't get because of that. And vice versa. Sometimes you'll get a negative outcome and sometimes I'll get a negative outcome.
Yes. It's just an approach to life that, unfortunately, because we don't have scorecards or stat sheets, we're not going to be able to compare our high scores until the afterlife. And then at that point, we won't have any lessons learned.
Like our listener that took your drive-through strategy and refused to move at McDonald's and got a cut ahead of 4 people.
He didn't cut ahead of 4 people.
Yes,
he got
he
his
did.
food at the appropriate time for when he showed up at the restaurant. We're not going down that road again. But yeah,
okay.
Exactly that.
Well, I want to go down a similar but slightly different road. I may have texted you about this. I definitely posted about it on social media. Are you aware of the recent social phenomenon that happens where there's this unplanned chain of people in a drive-through, let's say a Starbucks, where the person pulls up and the person behind them's already ordered, and they say, I'll pay for my order and I'll pay for the person behind me's too. And then that starts a chain where then when the next person pulls up to the window, the person ahead of them's already paid for their order, so then they pay for the person behind them's order.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
This is a great game theory scenario.
I have been a part of that as well.
Okay. So the chaos of this is that it's not everybody ordered a $5 latte. Sometimes you pull up and the person has paid for your order and you're like, okay, what's the person behind me's order? And there's like 5 people in the car.
Right. Now, when I did it, I didn't ask what the total for the guy behind me was. I just said, oh, well, I'll just pay for the person behind me. But that's because, so if you're going to Starbucks, you should have the disposable income to pay for a larger than average coffee order. If you can't, or you're not planning to, don't go to Starbucks. Go to Circle K and get a 69-cent black coffee. So, like, I'm assuming that if you're going to Starbucks, you have the disposable income to flex a little bit for other people's orders. First of all, that's my assumption.
Okay, I'd read about this a few years ago, and for some reason it had leaked out of my brain. So maybe 2 weeks ago. It was like the week before Christmas. I was busy. I was out doing something. I was really hungry. I pulled through McDonald's and got like an Egg McMuffin and an orange juice. And I pulled up to the window and the clerk says, "Hey, the person in front of you paid for your order." And my brain just failed to make the connection to this social phenomenon. And I went, "Huh, that was nice of her.
Awesome.
Thanks."
And
I drove off.
Yes.
But I did it completely guilelessly. I wasn't like making a decision to break the chain or being, outraged or something. I just accidentally did it and then later on realized what had happened.
This feels a lot less like a conversation you want to have about this phenomenon, and a lot more you want a soapbox to apologize to the whole universe for not keeping this chain of good Samaritan.
That's the thing, Josh. We're talking about the morality quadrant we're in. I wasn't upset about it. The fact that I didn't make the connection makes me feel completely absolved of guilt. I feel no guilt whatsoever with the fact that someone bought my breakfast that morning.
Oh, well, good. You shouldn't feel any guilt, especially with a McMuffin and an orange juice.
But it was because it wasn't deliberate. Just like you talked about when my kids won several of the prizes in the raffle at the squadron party, and you were like, "Oh, well, don't feel bad about that." I'm like, "Yeah, I do," because, yeah. Anyway, that was that. Listeners, if you've participated in one of these chains, we'd love to hear your philosophy on it, where you fall on the spectrum and how to act in that situation. Apparently, Josh, I find it interesting that you decided to carry on. You're just like, I will not be the one to break the chain.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good way of expressing what my feelings were in that exact moment. But I think it was just, I went up to the window with my card and I was expecting to give money. And they said, "Oh, somebody's already paid for you." And I'm like, "Well, too bad. You're taking my money anyway."
I see. Okay. Yeah, I guess I was just ready to accept the kindness of some stranger. Like you said in the game theory thing, I'm assuming they're also doing kind things like I would have done. I'm like, "Oh, someone did something kind for me. I appreciate that. That made me feel good. I'll have a great day because of this." As opposed to, now I have to participate in this social contract that I didn't want to participate in.
"Oh, the person in front of you already paid for your order. Why? What do they want? What are they trying to get out of me?"
That was great. All right, well, something else that's been going on this holiday season is it like for, I think, 3 more days, there's still Vintage Cube on Magic the Gathering Online. I think between you and I, we played 150 matches.
Something like that, man. So I had the week off after Christmas before New Year's, and boy howdy, did I grind me some Vintage Cube. It was so fun.
Yeah, when I first introduced you to Vintage Cube and you started playing, you might remember this. You had like this paranoia because every match you have to pay a $10 entry fee or the virtual equivalent thereof. And you were just keenly aware of the stakes and the gap in your knowledge. Meaning you felt when you were very first starting that there was a high risk that you weren't going to receive a return on your investment and you were going to lose it.
Yes, and so I had nothing vested in Magic the Gathering Online, the client that supports this. So every time I failed to go 2-1, I would have to get my credit card out and put $10 into the void, into the ether, and just burn it and send it off away somewhere.
Yes.
And also, like you said, there was a knowledge gap because Vintage that is not for beginners. That is all of the best and most complicated interactions that exist in the game. So, yeah, in my early Vintage career, I was terrified. But Ben, boy, I came into this one, I was locked, loaded, and ready.
Yeah, so you studied the cube, and you did some practice rounds, you watched videos, and you have pulled off like a 60% win rate?
It went down today because I played 2 full drafts today and went 0-3, which is a terrible way to end up. So.
But you have won enough that you haven't had to continue putting additional resources in to continue playing.
No. Everybody got 1 free entry this entire season. And I think right now I have used that free entry and then 1 more, and that's it. And like you said, I've played, I'm 43.
Like 60 or 70?
Yeah, I've played, I'm 43 and 29, so what is that, 71 matches?
Yeah. Yeah,
at one point, my win rate was almost 70%, and I'm so pumped. I did so good this season.
Yeah, very good. You exceeded me. I have stagnated, and so you've been poking at me to try to improve my skill set. And this is, in Vintage Cube, it's really difficult to improve your skill set because you have to be comfortable with lots of different winning strategies. And I prefer to stay in my safe space of just like 4 or 5. And if those are open, maybe I'll get a good deck and win. But if I'm forced to go into one of my strategies I'm not comfortable with, I don't do very well.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense why you play the same deck for the last 5 years.
But that kind of thing is useful being a specialist. Every now and then the format comes along where that kind of deck is viable and I do really well.
And that makes this all speaking to our preferences. Your preference is to play a constructed deck that you know backwards and forwards. My preference is to draft. I want it to be completely different every time I sit down.
Yeah. Nice. Well, these are things that if you like games and you haven't tried Magic the Gathering, these are very rewarding parts of playing this game. The variety, the ability to kind of scratch your psychological itch, whether it's winning or being creative or doing something powerful, it's all there.
Yeah, like it is the original awesome strategy game.
One of our listeners this week sent me a YouTube of a TikTok, because I'm not on TikTok and I don't know how I would share a TikTok, but they sent me a YouTube of a TikTok of a guy, and well, I'll let you describe it.
So it's funny because after you sent that to me, I saw several others like popping up on Reddit as that's the only place I consume TikTok as well. I'm not on TikTok. I'm in my late 30s. I think I'm too old to pick up new social media platforms at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it was a mocking kind of TikTok. What is that? Not a sarcastic, not sardonic, but like what political commentarians do. What do they call that? There's a word for it, and I'm going to get stuck on that word. We can
satire.
Satire. Yes, thank you. It was a satire on what two people podcasts are always like. Hey,
yeah,
I'm a random, normal, straight white guy from a middle America town, and so are you. And our conversations are always so interesting. We should totally record it and put it out into the world. And yeah, I'll tell you what, when you sent it to me, it did hit very close to home.
Just right in the feels. I was like, oh, that was brutal. And he's like, yeah, and we could do the first episode where we introduce each other. Yeah, all right. Well, you buy all the equipment and do all the work, and I will think up a title for it.
So ours isn't that bad. I feel like we both put a little bit into it.
Yeah, I would agree. The two authors of Freakonomics, they told this little anecdote about how when they were trying to decide who would get the money for the book, about how they both felt like the other person was doing more work, and so it made them easily arrive at a 50-50 split. And I think that's a good way to feel about something like that.
Yeah, if you always feel like the other person's doing more than you.
Yeah, but you're trying.
Let's be clear. You're doing way more than I am. You're always commenting to me, like, our listeners, this is a peek behind the scenes of Bad at Magic. Ben's always sending me links to articles about how to increase like listenership and how to appeal to a broader audience and ways that you can market the podcast and be so great. And I'm over here honestly treating this like I just get to come talk to my best friend every other week.
And drink beer.
Like, we have totally different experiences with this podcast, buddy.
Yeah, but again, just like we both play Magic and enjoy it while we're getting different experience out of it, it's the same with this podcast, I think. So I was listening to another podcast this week. It is by one of the authors of Freakonomics, and he was interviewing a man by the name of Jared Diamond. Jared Diamond is a fascinating guy. He's in his 70s, and he's still a professor at like UCLA or something like that. And he had an entire career where he got a doctorate, and he was like one of the world's 5 foremost experts on the gallbladder. And he was a professor of physiology, and he got like a Rhodes Fellowship or something. And he said he just was like, is this what I'm going to do forever? I hate it. And he totally reinvented himself in like his 50s or 60s or something like that, and became like a world-renowned geographer and started writing books. And he won a Pulitzer Prize for one he wrote that's called, let me bring it up.
Oh no, Ben's not prepared for the random segment that he started talking about off the cuff. He doesn't
Guns, Germs, and Steel. Have you read it?
Yes, of course I've read Guns, Germs, and Steel.
Okay, so this is the author. This is the author that wrote Guns, Germs, and Steel. I may have read it because you recommended it to me.
So that's something we should probably review on the podcast at some point.
I think so too.
It is hotly debated how viable the hypotheses that he puts out in that book are. But listeners, if you are curious about why the world is the way the world is, Guns, Germs, and Steel, honestly, I feel like is a good place to start.
Yeah. So listening to him talk, I could just hear all the gears turning. I think this guy's a thinker. You know, he really takes stuff on. Anyway, he told this anecdote where he was off somewhere on an adventure doing some research and like really detailed anthropological research where he was just studying the history of places, and he was on some river in Africa or Southeast Asia where he had native guides, and they were in a canoe with one of those like outboard motors that's on a really long pole. Yeah. And there were two canoes loaded with like foreigners or whatever, and he was on this canoe, and he was utterly at the mercy of this driver. And he was feeling nervous about it, and the driver started hot dogging, and he was like, the passengers were yelling at them to stop, but these are natives, you know, they're like, nothing bad ever happens, they felt immortal. Anyway, they crash the canoes, overturn, everyone goes in the water, and it was like at night or something. Half the people on this expedition died.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So he talked about how he was kind of aware that he was taking a lot of risks on this expedition, but he reached a point where he had utterly turned over all of his agency to someone else, and he was at their mercy.
Okay.
And he made a determination not to do this. Now, there's a place you can go psychologically in this kind of scenario where you just shut down. You're like, I'm not taking risks anymore. I'll just stay at home where it's safe and stuff. But he wasn't like that. So he developed what he called constructive paranoia.
I like this already.
I know. I heard him say this, and I thought, that sounds like Josh. So it refers to the fear of things that usually do not go wrong in life in a way that doesn't just paralyze you, but that helps you prepare for scenarios so that if there were potentially disastrous consequences, you would be prepared to act.
Oh, this is just cost-benefit analysis then.
It kind of is, but it's something else. It's like, what could I have been preparing to do if I was still going to go out on this canoe expedition so that I wasn't just utterly at the mercy of careless people?
Don't get on a canoe where you turn over all your agency to some teenager idiot?
Yeah. Maybe.
Maybe.
But like, maybe he just brought along a little survival kit and an inflatable life vest.
Be prepared to survive without support in an environment like that for more than a day?
Right.
I mean, again, it goes back to cost-benefit, because then you have to weigh, like, here is the myriad of possible things that could happen, and then you have to associate the likelihood that they are going to happen,
yes,
and then what the
we
cost...
practice this in the military all the time. We call it operational risk management. You can't spend all your resources on things that potentially could happen that are so improbable and require a great amount of resources to address.
Right. Yes, exactly. Everybody has to pick their own sliding scale for how much, like you said, resources, time, money, and effort that they are going to put into preparing for things that are increasingly unlikely to happen.
Yes.
It's like you see the TV shows that we used to watch for, I think we watched this for 3 episodes, called Doomsday Preppers. You ever seen that show?
I'm aware of it. I haven't watched an episode. Talk about it.
I would encourage you to watch 1 or 2 episodes, but that's all you need to, because every episode is exactly the same. They pick some nutcase that has decided that this incredibly unlikely scenario is absolutely certain to happen, and they spend all their time, money, and resources preparing for it.
So I would posit that is not constructive paranoia.
Probably not, because this one guy spent tens of thousands of dollars digging a bunker under his garage and did it in such a way that he kept it a secret from his neighbors.
It is time for Bad at Logic.
And since it's an odd episode, and Josh is odd, and it's a bias, and I'm very biased, so we're going to do a bias.
Okay, what do you got for us?
All right, so this is a fun one because the name is wrong. On our cards, it says, your bias is the sunk cost fallacy.
So is it a fallacy or a bias?
Well, I'm claiming it because it's on a bias card, and I am biased. So this is, I try to point this out to people all the time. And it was explained to me in high school, and I've kept the exact same example in my brain for what sunk cost fallacy means.
All right, before you give the example, read the definition.
Oh, I have to read it. Yes, verbatim. You irrationally cling to things that have already cost you something.
Okay.
So just because you
Cost
paid
you
for it,
anything, money, time.
energy,
Yes.
worry, stress, whatever, you put some kind of cost down, and so you cling to it, even if the benefit of doing so is no longer there.
You cling to it irrationally.
Yes. The example that was given to me that I love to death is when you go to an all-you-can-eat buffet and you feel like you need to eat more even after you're full. You need to eat to the level of discomfort because you paid for all you can eat, and so you're going to keep eating until you absolutely cannot anymore, even though you are no longer deriving value from it.
Okay. That's an interesting example.
I went to a lot of all-you-can-eat buffets as a kid.
So you had already committed this particular sunk cost fallacy.
Well, the idea there is that, yes, you've paid, but it doesn't matter. Like, the paying is already done. You cannot pay less. You cannot get your money back. So only derive the value from it that you want or that you can expect to get. And after that point, just give up on it.
Okay, I'll give an example from real life. In episode 62, I told the story of me going to my general to pitch a IT acquisition to him. The sunk cost part of this is that when I inherited it, the government had already spent $1.8 million on it. And he did, as most people do, oh, well, he spent that much money on it, we can't just abandon it, even though the reason that we bought it has changed and no longer exists. So let's figure out a purpose for it and go ahead and use it. I did an analysis, and by my estimation, if we keep it as is, the unit cost of it will be roughly $3,500 annually. And what prompted this decision was that the big Air Force came to us and says, we're offering this service as a managed offering, and we'll sell it to you at $3,000 a unit annually.
Or we could build the capability internally and spend this much money on it.
Right. Now, it's complicated. There's other considerations, but if that's all you had, that like, well, if we go ahead and field the one that we built internally, it's going to cost $3,500 each, or we can take this one they're offering to us for $3,000 each. Well, if we take the one they're offering to us $3,000 each, what happens to the one we bought? Well, we just abandon it and throw it away.
Yeah,
well, we can't.
that's
We can't do that.
Cost. Yes, you can. It is sunk cost. It is better to do the other thing.
Yeah.
Just because you paid for something doesn't mean that you have to milk it for everything that it has.
But we're talking about buffets and IT acquisitions. This could be anything. This could be a bad girlfriend. This could be...
Yes, that's excellent. Relationships with other people. Just because you've poured a lot of time and effort doesn't mean that relationship is still worth it.
Yeah. So, if you don't let the fact that something has cost you be a reason to stay in a bad situation.
Always evaluate what you are doing based on right now. Am I
say
what is the cost?
hypocritically.
What is the cost right now versus what is the benefit in the future? How much do we spend in time, effort, and blood on this podcast versus what the benefit of it is going, oh, we can't. We probably shouldn't.
That's right. So I quoted on this podcast, I don't know where it came from, the two best times to plant a tree are 20 years ago and today. Now, I'm going to flip this on its head and express it in terms of sunk cost fallacy. The two best times to stop doing something wasteful are before you wasted any money on it or time or energy or emotion, or right now.
That's a really good way of putting it. Yes. I like that. Good job.
For Bad English today, I want to share one that I thought was just common English, but I realized I was in this space where as a foreigner, I could just absorb, during my time in the UK, I could just absorb the culture I was getting and not realize that I was only getting a subset of it. Because I was in one particular geographic location with one particular kind of people, and I might assume that this, like if somebody was visiting us, they go, oh, this thing that Ben and Josh told me is American, but if you just go one state over, they wouldn't even know what we were talking about because it's different. Well, in this case, it was a military slang term. The British military has their own slang terms that aren't considered to be part of wider British culture. Now, there are things that we have in the military that we consider, like for instance, saying the word hua to show agreement or pleasure or something like that. When you hear that, you think military, and it's obvious that that's a military thing. Like if there was a foreigner with us and they heard us say that, maybe they would think that was an American thing instead of a military thing. But probably pick up that it was military in nature.
What's funny is in my house, if I say hua, it's like a challenge response for my wife because I'll go hua and she'll go ugh.
Yeah. So the word that I'm talking about was threaders, spelled
Threaders.
Threaders. And I thought that's how I heard it. That's how I wrote it down. And when I Googled it, it came up in like 3 different British military slang dictionaries.
Okay, threaders.
Threaders. They would say, "Oh, I'd stay and work on this project for another hour, but I'm threaders," which means angry or fed up, annoyed, strung, just finished.
Fried. Done. Sleepy.
Threaders. So
Okay.
I could not find etymology on this whatsoever. So British listeners, if you can help me track down any etymology on why the word threaders means. But if you Google threaders, you will also find lots of things for like putting yarn through needles and earrings in people's ears.
Actual literal threaders.
But if you're in the British military, it also means that you're fed up with something.
Interesting. Like, again, just this is one of those fails. Like, some of these make sense and I like. Some of these are just like, why? Why? Just say fried, strung out, tired.
Yeah. For our main segment today, Josh, it's the first podcast of 2022, and I want to talk about resolutions. Now, I don't remember how much detail we've done in the podcast in the past. I understand that I'm a predictable person and inclined to do the same thing again over time. The longer this podcast goes on, the more likely I am to repeat myself. However, when I said this to you and you kind of gave me a virtual eye roll, I think you may have actually sent me an eye roll emoji in a text or something like that. I intended that I would plan out my 2022 New Year's resolutions, bring them to you on the podcast, and we would discuss them together, and you might reciprocate in kind or something similar thereunto. And as I started to do this, I realized something different. This is what's going to make this unique and not just what we did last year or the year before. I want you to help me set my New Year's resolutions.
Oh, dear.
So here's the thing, Josh. I will execute this the way I've always done it. Have you ever heard the phrase, if you always do what you've always done,
No.
you can't complete it?
I've never heard that.
If
No.
you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got.
That's a long phrase.
But you get the point.
Yeah, like if you keep doing crap the same way over and over, the results aren't going to change.
Right. So I figured I'd tell you what my motivations are, what my intent is, and maybe you can help me come up with something. I don't know. That's how I want to approach this.
Okay. All right. Well, if we're going to go down that route, then we have to have a conversation about what people think resolutions are and what resolutions should be.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is funny because that's the conversation that I came prepared. Because, Ben, I'm not a resolutions guy.
I get that. But I think when we discussed this a few weeks ago, we both also agreed that it whatever reason somebody thinks they want to make a change in their life, we're in favor of that.
Yes, absolutely. And you should do that at any point. However, if you do commit yourself to a specific goal, and we'll call them resolutions, goals. I'm going to use those terms interchangeably here because that's what they are. Resolutions are just goals that happen to be in early January. That's the only difference. If you make them in March, are they still resolutions? No, they're goals. Well, whatever. Semantics. So when we're in the military, they teach us this. They teach it. You're supposed to have SMART goals, Ben. You've heard that, of course.
I have. It's an acronym that means specific, measurable, actionable, something and something.
Realistic and timely.
Realistic and timely.
So, yes, you need to have, I forget what the S was. You said it.
Specific.
Specific. When you set a goal, it's not supposed to be, I want to lose weight in this year. It needs to be, I want to lose X number of pounds in X number of months. You need to have like exactly the roadmap. Like this is the finish line that I'm setting for myself. And it is not vague. It is very attainable. Like I can see it and I know how to get there. Measurable. Again, I don't want to lose weight. I want to lose X amount of pounds. Losing weight, like, I lost half a pound. Yay, I've won. Time to fall off the bandwagon and back into my barrel of ice cream. Attainable. I want to lose 125 pounds in the next 6 months. That's not realistic. You will die.
Yeah, the physics on that aren't good unless you're getting liposuction.
Attainable, realistic. I think. Okay, so for the weight loss, my weight loss analogy is breaking down here because there are some things that are attainable. For example, I want to be a millionaire. That's attainable. Is it realistic? Maybe not.
Yeah.
And then timely. Again,
I've heard it expressed as time bound.
Time. Yes, you have to have a drop dead date.
Right.
I will do this by this date because that stops you from doing that thing. It creates the artificial pressure.
Right.
It cuts out the pretend slack that you build in your brain. Like, oh, I'll start that tomorrow. No, if you have a hard deadline, you can't move it, then you have to start today.
So I heard an anecdote once that I thought was really apt in these kinds of situations, that you don't get the problem of a dog who's trying to dig his way under a fence. He furiously digs and digs and digs as if the fence were the problem, and then when he gets underneath, he sits down on the other side. And the idea there is that if you don't see farther than the barrier that you're setting your goal at, you get on the other side and you don't know where to go from there. I'll give an example. On this podcast a year ago, I was in the midst of a deployment to CENTCOM, and I had a lot of time to work out and focus on some physical health goals. I had the goal of losing 30 pounds and running a marathon. I remember you gave me a little bit of crap about those goals, but if you recall, I succeeded in both of those goals.
Good on you, buddy.
A year later, I could no longer run a marathon, and I've gained back 25 of those 30 pounds.
Well, and this is the difference between the types of goals that we set for ourselves. For example, the number one, you go on any website of the top 10 resolutions for whatever year. The number one is always going to be lose weight. Everybody always wants to lose weight. And here's the thing. Losing weight is easier than keeping the weight off. Because
oh my gosh.
Keeping weight off means you need to make systematic, permanent changes to your life.
Okay, so I want to linger on this for a minute. Explain to me how to set a SMART goal, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and timely, about keeping weight off.
So this goes back to an old idiom where you gain muscle in the gym, but you lose weight in the kitchen.
Right.
If you're serious about weight loss, then you need to educate yourself and reevaluate your eating habits.
So I'll take that one step further and say you need to transform your culture surrounding eating.
Yes.
Because that's why I go back. Is I can take a break from my culture, but I go back to it.
So an easy one is cut back on the number of times you eat out in any given time frame. Like,
sure.
I'm only going to go out to eat twice in a week, or I'm going to substitute a salad for protein, or something like that, X number of times a month, or whatever.
Yeah.
Again, but you have to like this thing. You have to educate yourself because you can't. Atkins diet, all the fad diets out there aren't long-term sustainable. It's like, oh, I can eat whatever I want and I'm losing weight. It's like, yeah, because you're literally starving your body of something that it wants and you're forcing it to go into a backup energy production routine. Like, that's bad for you. You just need to eat better things across the board. Everything that you eat needs to be better, not just one set kind of food for like 6 months. That's not going to be healthy.
Yeah, I can't tell you how much emotional relief I felt to just be back and go back to my I don't care about what I'm eating routine. Like that, it's a heavy burden to carry. If you don't transform it in a way where it becomes the new normal.
Yes, and that's the thing. Like whenever I want to lose weight, for me personally, the first thing I do is I say, okay, I just need to cut down on soda. I need to just go down to like one can every other day or so.
Yeah.
Because if I don't watch myself, if I'm not actively on top of it, I will drink 3 cans of soda before lunch and not worry about it.
Okay, so talk about those 3 cans of soda in terms of utility to Fat Josh.
To Fat Josh?
What are you getting out of those? Why it isn't easy for you to make that trade?
Because what I should be drinking is water. Which water is wonderful.
No. What is the benefit you get from the soda?
I'm getting there. It's the opportunity cost. I should be drinking water. That's the thing I should be drinking. I want to drink soda, specifically Dr. Pepper, because it's ambrosia. It was carried down from Mount Olympus, and it's the most glorious thing that can pass through your gullet. Like, that's why I want it. It's delicious.
Okay. Yeah, you definitely answered it. So that pleasure that you derive from it is because it tastes good, it's interesting, It enlivens the senses and those kinds of things.
And it's a moment on the lips and a lifetime on the hips. Buddy.
I get that. But now take that little moment of oh, this is pleasant to drink. I like this. This is interesting. This is a diversion, whatever. And now you suck that out of your life and just replace it with something joyless, like a cup of room temperature water.
So here's the thing. It's a long game because the soda is pleasing and drives value now, but that's very short-term value, very short-term utility I derive from the soda. Whereas if I can make this systematic change in my life, then theoretically I will have a longer life, and therefore the overall utility should be increased in the long run.
This will come up again in this discussion, I'm sure. And I don't know how to balance long-term versus near-term. I mean, you can live in such a way where you suck every moment of your current life of joy because you're so worried about extending it as long as possible. You know,
what was that movie with Justin Timberlake where they had the currency was time and they only had so much time to live and it was on their arm?
I did not see that one.
No, you didn't.
No.
Okay, I encourage you to see that just because it's an interesting concept. Their currency was time. You had 1 year.
You sound like you're explaining an episode of Black Mirror.
It was a whole movie.
Huh.
You have 1 year as a giant clock on your forearm when you're born. And when you turn, I think it's 25, you stop aging, and then the lights, like the LEDs on your arm, start ticking down. And then you also use that time as currency to purchase things in your life. And then you go to work and you are paid in time. And It was an interesting concept because, for example, if that existed today, if we were able to tell, like, oh, I'm going to drink this soda, and then actually see physically, visibly, right there in your face, what effect that had on the length of time that you were going to live, people would make very different decisions.
We try to do this so much. One example that comes to mind is the Doomsday Clock.
Oh, from what, the Cold War?
From the Cold War. It was like, okay, this clock is going to represent how much time goes by until it's midnight and the world comes to an end. And so by the things we're doing right now in this moment, we're influencing the end of the world. And so if we disarm 40,000 warheads, we'll tick the clock back a half hour. Now we're a little bit farther away from Doomsday than we thought we were.
Wasn't it like 3 minutes to midnight or something at one point during the Cuban Missile Crisis?
I don't even know. If someone's still tracking this, I'm going to look it up real fast. Give me some cover.
From the little bit that I have read about the Doomsday Clock is that it was an effort by the scientific community to try to articulate exactly what you're talking about. The decisions that macro politics and economics are having on the state of existence. Okay. And they were just trying to be alarmist about this concept to get people more invested in it. But the problem was nobody cared.
Yeah, and, you know, you become the boy who cried wolf. Because if you say that Doomsday is in 15 minutes, people look at their watch and like, spend 15 minutes. You know,
it's a metaphor.
But we had the same problem after September 11th when we came out with the terrorist warnings and they were assigning levels and they were always moving it up and down, but nothing was ever happening. And so people were like, what does this even mean?
Well, it's like the January 6th insurrection. We're talking about like the entire government and like our way of life almost came to a screeching halt and collapsed in anarchy. But most people's lives didn't change not one iota. So a lot of people are like, who cares?
Yeah. So apparently the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists maintain the Doomsday Clock of lore. And currently it says it is 100 seconds to midnight.
So we are closer to the end of the world than we have ever been. And nobody cares.
There hasn't been an update since January 27, 2021, and it says something about COVID. I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to read it.
And then all the scientists that were maintaining it died.
So what are some other things that people want to set goals about besides their weight?
All right, so I did a quick, I did the most in-depth research that I have ever done for this podcast. I typed in top 10 resolutions, and I clicked the first link that showed up in Google. This is a list. This is a list from Country Living from 2021. And these are the kinds of garbage goals or resolutions that people are setting for themselves. Are you ready? Here they are.
Yeah.
Lose weight. Eat healthier. Those two are the same thing. People seem to separate them. I don't know why.
Okay.
3, get more fit. Again, refer back to 1 and 2. Those are the same thing. People think they're different. Whatever. 4, spend more time with family and friends. Legitimate. 5, be more aware and take care of your mental health. 6, sort out your finances. 7 is travel more. Number 8 is take up a new hobby, a sport, or interest. Number 9, be more environmentally friendly. And number 10, I thought was very interesting, look for a new job.
Okay, I want to dig into these in a way that's going to kind of be a bit subversive. I don't want to talk about them specifically. I want to talk about what's happening underneath the hood. Okay. Although, spend more time with family and friends. Like, what's happening when someone makes that resolution? They feel like, okay, in the year that just went by, it's over now. I made the decisions of what to do with my time, but I regret them.
I don't know. Or is that just something that you say when you're reflecting? It's like, oh, I spent a lot of time playing video games. I should have. I would feel better about myself if I had spent that time with other people. I think that's a logical catch-22 because obviously you didn't, because at the time when you had the opportunity to spend time with them, you didn't. You decided to do something else with your time. Obviously, at the moment, you thought that was more important to you. Why does that change in retrospect? I think you're applying different filters when you're looking back at your past actions versus when you are deciding what to do now.
Okay, so I tried to make a list of why people make resolutions. You can see in that list there of the ones that you gave, there's like maybe they want to extend their life or improve the quality of their life. I felt like it covered everything.
Yeah, it's like my life needs to be longer and more fulfilling.
Yeah, more full of joy or happiness or connection or whatever. So I made a different list, and in mine I felt like you have a desire to improve. But inherent in a desire to improve is maybe kind of an admission that like you aren't happy with the way things are. Because if you were, why would you try to change it?
I'm very happy with the way things are, and I'm changing very little.
I would challenge that.
Okay.
Here's an example that came to mind. Because in some arenas, you and I have different alarm levels. Like there are things I would try to fix that you wouldn't and vice versa. And you talked about when your shower head broke and it leaked into the wall and you fixed the plumbing and the problem was done. But then there was water damage around the bottom of the baseboards and drywall.
Yes.
Like I would have just covered that up and been fine. You like freaking tore the house apart.
Yes. And I am still working on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have just painted over it, man. Like, it's fine. It's not going to get any worse. It'll never bug me. But maybe that comes with my investment in. I don't own the house. I know I'm going to be moving again in 2 years, yada, yada, yada. As opposed to, like, you guys are really settled down right now. So there's a desire to improve. Perhaps because we're talking about New Year's resolutions in particular, there's this refreshing that comes from the turnover of the new year and the end of the holiday season, and we were just like, okay, I have to get away from that unsustainable holiday lifestyle.
Yeah, there was a calendar that we saw earlier in the year. It's like where these whole last 2 weeks was just destroy your body with food and alcohol.
Yes,
that's
yes.
what you do.
Okay, that's over because I can't live like that all year round. I'd be dead in 2 years, and I would not be happy.
It would be so great if you could.
Another is to reduce friction. Like maybe you recognize areas in your life where friction exists. You're not making enough money to make ends meet. Your clothes are starting to fit too tight. Your relationships are suffering a little bit. Somewhere in your life you've got friction and you want to reduce that friction. Prolonged life we've already mentioned. Perhaps you want to improve your net worth. Maybe you want to increase your standard of living. You want to have something to pass on to future generations. Those kinds of things. We didn't talk. There was no financial goals really on that list, were there?
Look for a new job, I think, would be the close to financial goals.
That might be financial, but it could be for other reasons as well.
I think a lot of people see financial issues in their life as something they don't have agency over. Which
I'm surprised, like get out of debt or pay off my car or something like that isn't on that list.
Oh, we live in a consumer society, Ben. That's not how we think. Like that is like that specifically. That's one of our goals we have in our household. But it's not a resolution. It's just an ongoing thing that we're constantly aware of. So when we're making financial decisions, we have priorities.
Yeah. So you might also want to improve the relationships in your life, and that doesn't really fit in any of those other categories. Or just
spend more time with family and friends, I feel like, is that, but that's okay.
Yeah. But I mean, that wasn't prolonging life or, getting out of an unsustainable lifestyle or those kinds of things.
Oh,
now,
got it. Okay.
I looked at this list and I'm like, okay, so those are reasons why you would set resolutions. What are reasons you might not? Because I know people that resist setting resolutions. So maybe your personality is that when you set resolutions, you fail to achieve them, and you just create this cycle of setting yourself up for embarrassment or failure. In which case, just stop doing that, and you're happier by not doing it.
Okay.
Maybe you're just not ambitious, or you're satisfied. You're just content. Be like, yeah, I'm happy where I'm at. Like, why do I need to set resolutions?
The pessimistic version of that is people that feel they don't have any agency in their lives. People that don't realize that they don't have the control to change these things.
And that is the fourth one, pessimism.
Oh, well, there you go.
So those are the reasons I wrote that you might want to create resolutions, and perhaps the reasons not to. So if you're listening and you were already decided you weren't going to, or you were, or maybe you just want to focus on a few of these areas, whatever it is, let's dive in and talk about what we're trying to accomplish. I like just having an annual cycle. When I was a kid, my dad, I don't know where he got it, some self-help book or something like that, he used to sit us down about once a year, and he had this notebook that he kept, and in it he had a page with us, and he would be like, all right, let's review your goals from last year and set some for next year. It was like, I don't know, it was like a little self-help seminar. And
Sounds like a performance review. Like, all right, child, you are now 7. Let's see if you are performing satisfactorily or not.
You laugh, but my dad was doing us with these when we were 7, and he would just help us set age-appropriate goals. Whatever, I want to lose 2 teeth this year. Great, good goal.
That's not a good goal. You have no agency over losing teeth.
I was being facetious. We would set goals like, I want to save up enough money over the summer that I can buy a new bicycle.
Boy, it must have been really awkward when you were 17. It's like, I want to have sex with all the girls in the cheerleading squad.
Yeah, those aren't the kind of goals you set with your dad. Okay,
that's the kind of goals I set with my dad.
Sometimes I feel like the status quo is pretty good. Like, is the fact that I feel motivated to set resolutions, does that mean I'm not grateful for what I have?
That's not. No. Those two, they're not mutually exclusive. Just really? Because, this is a standard thing that you read all those books about, the top 10 things that successful people do in their lives or whatever. Every one of those lists is going to have, they make goals, and they remind themselves what those goals are, and they strive to achieve them. People that are chronically successful are constantly looking for ways that they can improve upon their success. They're never resting on their laurels, which is part of the reason they're successful in the first place.
I agree. What you just said seems to be universal in self-help media. That if you are the kind of person that sets goals and makes them, you will be a success of some sort.
It doesn't matter how minuscule or how low level you start. The idea is you get in this habit of, I'm going to do this, and then actively pursuing it. That's the key.
But by definition, if you're content with where you are, of course you're not going to change. I suppose maybe just something where... Okay, so the movie Big Lebowski just came to mind. He had this tremendous adventure, and the whole time he was just trying to get his rug back.
Well, that guy... that
But he didn't want to change anything. The dude abides. He was just happy.
The dude abides. He wrote a successful book back 3 or 4 decades ago and was just living on the royalties.
Yeah, that's what I wonder about people I read about who, this person made $25 million on YouTube. I'm like, they could probably stop now. But the story isn't about that. It's about what they're doing next.
Yeah. If I ever had a major windfall like that, I always imagine all right, what do we do? And as an accountant, I always talk about here are the levels of threshold. This is the threshold of money you need to, 1, pay the taxes on it, and 2, still have enough money that the residual interest that you earn just by putting that away sustains your current lifestyle. I mean, that's the dream. That is the dream.
Absolutely. You had a big enough nest egg that you could just never work and maintain your current quality of life.
Think about that for just a second, listeners. Imagine having your exact same quality of life, but all of your time, 100% of every day is yours. That's just bliss to me.
It kind of sounds that way. I heard a maxim once that I realize is true in my life, even though I wanted to say it wouldn't be true of me, and that is that your lifestyle expands to consume your available income.
This is absolutely true. Absolutely true, because we live in a consumer society, so the more money you have, the more money you spend. That's just a reality.
Yeah. So another part of setting resolutions for me is not being sheepish about grappling with my weaknesses. Like really taking a hard look in the mirror and being like, what about myself do I need to improve? Because I'm not setting resolutions for what other people need to do.
You need to stand up for yourself more. You need to be more of a jerk, Ben Rich.
That
Sometimes,
is definitely never the kind of resolution I would set, but we are taking a different approach here, so go ahead.
well, sometimes when life hands you lemons, instead of saying, yay, more lemonade for that I can sell for the poor, you need to wing those lemons back at life and be like, no, sir, these lemons aren't for me.
All right, I need to be on the lookout for an opportunity to do that because that's not the way I normally think. I can't think of it how I would do that.
An excellent example is when I don't remember the exact circumstances, but your boss came up and said, we need somebody to volunteer to do this. And you nose-goed. Like you said, nope, I'm not going to do it.
Okay, that.
Like that. Identify those examples where this is extra work for no benefit.
Okay. All right. So here's some of the personal weaknesses I listed out when I was like, okay, so what are the things that I really feel like my whole life or maybe recently I pop up and create problems and friction in my life that I'd like to be able to eliminate. So I've got pride, the pride of life that perhaps causes me pain, resentment, maybe forgiveness that needs to be given, inertia or laziness, things in my life that just I'm maintaining not because they're good, but just because it's a lot of effort to change them. Vanity, maybe I just want to appear good or whatever. If those are things that are causing me pain, I should be able to abandon them. Things
Are you just listing the 7 deadly sins now?
Maybe, but I don't know those because I'm not Catholic. So
I'd have to look them up. It's like
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I only have 6. So wrath.
Wrath is. Did you miss wrath?
No,
is there too much
wrath
in your life, Ben?
No.
I'll tell you what. I could definitely cut back on some of my wrath.
But Josh, you're kind of chill. Time wasting. So you and I have talked about this on the podcast, and I've always felt kind of reluctant to agree with you. You quoted, I don't remember who it was you quoted, that says if you enjoyed it, then the time wasn't wasted.
I don't know if I quoted anybody or if I just said it, but sure.
Okay, but we looked it up, I think, and I even put an infographic. I don't know, it was like John Lennon or somebody. Anyway, I always didn't feel right about that, so I thought it through, and here's what I think. If I waste time and enjoyed it, but I also regret it, then it is still wasted.
Now, here's the thing. What you're missing there is not that if you regret it, that's because of the opportunity cost. Regret comes from opportunity cost.
Okay. Because there are times where like I waste time and I'm fine with it. Like this morning I went and did a round of disc golf and it just felt like good fitness. It was time outside. I really enjoyed it. And I got back and it was 2 hours gone and it just felt like I spent those 2 hours on something worthwhile. On the other hand, if I'd stayed here and sat on my phone and played like a mobile game, I would have regretted it. Either way, it was just 2 hours wasted, but one has the regret that goes along with it.
Because you could have been playing disc golf, or you could have been feeding the poor, or you could have been hanging out with your family. Like you always have to identify like these are the things that I could have done with that time. But sometimes you do need to just have and not feel bad for taking a nap. Like, you know what? I feel terrible. I'm going to go take a nap. And you can't feel bad about it.
Yeah, a nap's a good example, but I feel like I've come to a great understanding of... my physiology has normalized enough that I just have a very good understanding of what's required for me to function. So I don't struggle with that too much.
We're not talking about sleep specifically. Okay, opportunity cost is not you can't do it on a case-by-case basis. You can't because you're failing every time. You have to take it as an aggregate. Pick a random time frame. Take all of the slack that you had during that time frame, this week, this month, this quarter, whatever. And in the aggregate, how much of that time do I regret wasting? If the answer is less than half of it, then you're doing good, or you could decrease that amount.
So there's something curious that's happening in the 21st century that perhaps our listeners and you and I are grappling with, and that's that in the past, you either had to invest a tremendous amount of overhead in tracking what was happening in your life to understand these kinds of things, or you just had to just have a vague idea about it but not really understand it in a concrete way. For instance, let's say I wanted to set a goal about how much physical activity to participate in. Like in the 80s, you just have to, I don't know, carry a notebook around with you everywhere and write it down. Now you can put on a Fitbit and it calculates with a pretty good degree of accuracy exactly how much movement you've done. And you can compare it to what you did the day before and last week and last year.
Dude, if you're talking about time tracking, yes. Like there are, like some people,
Yes.
some listeners might be familiar with at work. You have to code what you're doing with your time. They have apps where you can do that for your entire life. And
Yes,
that's
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
that sounds ridiculous in the big scale, but like when you start thinking about it, like I'm a huge believer in metrics. I love having hard numbers for stuff. And so I've always been interested in time tracking my whole life, but I've never taken that plunge because I don't know, maybe I'm worried about the overhead of doing it, or maybe I'm worried that I'm going to find some things out about myself that I just don't want to know.
All right, let me read you a quote by a man by the name of Thomas S. Monson. He said, "When performance is measured, performance improves. When performance is measured and reported, the rate of improvement accelerates." And that's, now we have like a way of, like you said, measuring time usage that's very low overhead. Like my phone tracks what I'm doing with it pretty accurately. Like if I have it in my hand and I'm looking at it, if it's in my pocket, it knows that. And then it's just automatically logging that in the background. Every now and then it'll send me a report and it says, you spent 2 hours less this week on your phone than you did last week. And I'll sit there for a minute and I'll be like, wow. Like if you'd asked me, I might have told you I spent the same amount both weeks. But I actually have 2 hours back that I didn't know I had. What was different this week? What was I doing that was different? What was different about my behavior?
Okay, so you're not actively like tracking, like recording what you did with your time throughout the day.
No.
You're just relying on your phone to try to tell you when you're on it or not.
Right.
Okay.
But it's passive logging rather than active logging.
Well, I'm honestly, I'm on the cusp that I feel like one resolution that I could make is maybe I could track my time for a quarter and see what that does for me.
Okay.
I'm going to need you to push me over the edge though. Or you cannot, and I cannot do that. I'm okay with it.
Got it. Let me think about it. The last weakness I'm grappling with is self-loathing. I'm really good at this. Maybe we're all good at it. Just kind of looking at your past failures, your patterns of failure, and your weakness. And there's reason there to not have hope that resolutions would do anything. And that might be a reason. Just be like, I'm not gonna make any resolutions because I suck.
What's funny is that sounds like a humble brag, Mister. Like I've accomplished more in this last year than most people have accomplished in their whole life, Mister. Like I help everyone and assume the best about everyone that I meet, including the random lady that's stuck in the middle of a four-way intersection. Mister, I go out of my way to help random homeless people that are just sitting on a porch across from my hotel room when I could be doing anything else with my time. The fact that you even think or have this level of self-loathing, one of two things. One, either shut up because you're just wrong. Or two, this is the reason, this is the underlying driving force of your entire character, is that somewhere in your past, this was drilled into the foundation of who you are to the point that you're constantly striving to be better. And by doing that, you're just making the rest of us look like chumps.
Well, what you just said is really true, because my initial reaction when you began that rant was to try to prove to you that you were wrong. And talk to you about all the ways that I suck. But that gets to my next question that I wrote down. That is, what drives me? Like, why am I trying to do this? What drives anyone who wants to do these things? Why? I mean, it's easy to go, oh, they want their life to be longer and better quality. But they don't.
No, they don't?
Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they do. I've heard people make arguments where they say people never change, and then they use that false assumption to substantiate something, and everyone sits around and nods and go, yeah, people never change. And I've heard that same person say people change all the time, and then use that false assumption to, make it some other thing, and everyone sits around and nods. It's like we understand that, yeah, we're always ourselves, but we change, of course. Are you the same person that you were 5 years ago? Where will you be 5 years from now?
I stopped making 5-year plans because every 5 years of my life has been so dramatically night and day different that I just gave up.
That's a great example of exactly what I'm talking about. That do we look at past failures to was the effort of making a 5-year plan worth it even though you didn't end up where you thought you would, or was it just wasted effort? It sounds like you made that second evaluation.
Oh man, that makes me now. I'm starting to reevaluate. Am I just letting life happen to me? Am I just going through and just doing whatever happens to land in front of me? I don't feel that way, but am I? I mean, I don't have a 5-year plan, so that just leaves me wandering through this unknown forest of the future.
Yeah. So what drives you? I know what drives me, and it's probably, even though sometimes the results look the same, they're coming from very different places.
So I guess I don't have a 5-year plan, but I do make smaller increment plans, and I'm in the middle of one right now. The biggest time sink that I have in my life is studying for my CPA exam.
Great example.
So
why are you doing that, and where's it going to lead?
Well, what that's going to do is directly impact my professional career, which is going to indirectly increase the quality of life for my family, and that's the ultimate underlying drive for that. You'll
make more money.
I will make hopefully. With the same amount of time investment into my career, I will make more money, which means that the return on investment is higher.
Do you feel like it will also improve the experience that you have doing the work?
I would hope so. I would hope that if I had a higher paying job with a larger scope of like whatever responsibility or control or name your thing, that would be more fulfilling. I just like my mind to be engaged in a way that I feel like I'm using it. I feel right now like the job that I do for a bunch of our small businesses, doing their accounting and trying to help them improve, I think that's a good use of it, and I feel fulfilled. But at the same time, I can also see myself doing a lot more than that.
Do you feel like you have a concrete expectation of what you would do with that money, or is it just kind of a vague, better standard of living?
It goes back to those priorities again. We in our household, we have the list of things that we want to do with our financial resources, and it waterfalls. Like once we check off box 1, now we have more slack, more financial resources for box 2, and it keeps trickling down and down and down. And the bottom of that is just more cool stuff. Like at the very bottom of my waterfall chart for financial resources is I want to have the financial slack to not feel guilty buying a $1,500 virtual reality gaming setup. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But before that, we need to have our retirement savings needs to be in check. We need to pay off all of we've just bought a new car. We need to pay that off first. We need to have solid savings for the kids' college in the future. Like all these things need to happen first.
Yeah, because this was on my mind, it had me thinking. I went grocery shopping with my 18-year-old daughter today because it's something we like to do together. Just when I go, I bring her with me and we have a good time just hanging out at the grocery store. And at one point, we were looking for some cheese to go with some meat and crackers that we got. And we'd passed out of the like craft store brand section of the store. We're in the like boutique deli section of the store, and we got the cheese there.
Where they're slicing the cheese specifically that you want. Yeah.
And I was kind of vaguely aware of the fact that I was paying about twice as much for the cheese as it was in the other section. But I also felt utility in my life. Like just this is me experiencing a higher quality of living that I don't got to worry about paying $3 for cheese instead of $1.
Well, here's the real question. Did you get a boutique style cheese, or did you have them just cut you up a block of cheddar? Because that would be a waste of money.
Yeah. I got a boutique style cheese.
Oh, good. Then it's completely justified. You have a new life experience to add to your list.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I have a 10-year plan, a 5-year plan, an annual plan, daily, monthly, weekly on certain things. You know, if you pick one particular thing, I might say, yeah, this is what's going on with all that. But other things, like I'm just making up as I go along, and I don't really care. And I don't know if I need to take more things in that vague, cloudy spot and put them in the concrete spot, or if I got things in the concrete spot that I just not learning that I've trying to make plans about, and I'd have no effect over it, and it's just wasted effort. Maybe I should be where you are with the 5-year plan thing.
Well, all you can do, so I've settled on this, is you can only make the best decisions that you can make at the time that you're called to make them. I can't see the future. I can make guesses. I can only rely on my experience and my understanding of the world this minute when I'm called to make a major decision. So the only thing that I can do is better prepare myself, be more educated, like have more skills, like just be the best that I can, try to be, so that way every moment that I'm called to make a decision, I'm at peak readiness for it.
Okay, something's coming to mind. I want you to talk about it. You and I have exchanged messages and stuff over the past where I think you weren't just being facetious, where you were dismayed with the political situation or the social situation or the economic situation to the point where you had showed that within your realm of things you're willing to consider, you are willing to migrate somewhere else on Earth.
Yes, I am. If things got too bad, too dire, or like our government shifted in a direction that I fundamentally disagreed with, I am willing to move to another country.
But you don't currently have that on your 5-10 year plan.
My wife and I jokingly said that if, all right, this is a glimpse into my own personal political beliefs. Listeners probably know what those are by this point if they listen to what I say. I don't intend to offend anyone when I say these things. But when ex-President Trump was running for re-election, I fundamentally disagreed with his policies and his beliefs and the things that he said, to the extent that my wife and I said if he was re-elected, we would move to Canada. And we were only about 40% joking. Like, we researched different cities that we could potentially move to and places that had affordable housing and like what the immigration policies were and how to get visas. Like, we were not entirely kidding when we say we were going to leave.
I feel like people saying that kind of thing is frequently just a speech act. There's no intent, there's no plan. It's just something you say.
I don't want to go down a political rabbit hole.
I get it.
But I will say that things have gotten to a point where, like, if it continued to escalate that way, like, what if January 6th had worked and that guy was still illegally now?
And the country descended into chaos and anarchy, and we had a non-elected person running the country?
It never would have descended into chaos and anarchy. It would have been basically the same for most people. This is like this doomsday scenario that people see on TV doesn't actually happen because everybody just wants to keep doing what they're doing. So for 99% of the country, people would just go back to work. But the people that were in charge at the highest levels would be making decisions based on a framework of understanding of the universe that I fundamentally disagree with. And that would eventually trickle down to where it started impacting my life.
I kind of see that, Josh, but and I hate to follow Godwin's law here. You remember what Godwin's law is, right?
I don't.
The longer a discussion on the internet goes on, the
closer it gets to Nazis.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about, though. That is what we're talking about. At what point, when Germany was transitioning to Nazi Germany, did people bail and get off the bandwagon and go somewhere else?
Yeah, and be like, okay, I've had too much, I got to get out of here. Or I don't like where this is going. They're slowly doing all these horrible things. At what point am I going to draw the line?
Yes, and I'm saying that. What I'm saying is that I do have a line. There is a line that if the government or whatever, if we cross fundamentally in this country, I will bail.
Yeah. Okay. So I made a list of the major areas in which we put these kinds of things. There's like the personal and professional ones. There's the spiritual ones. There's the social ones and the emotional ones and the financial ones. I had trouble kind of categorizing things sometimes, but I don't think the categories are as important as the idea that, like, okay, I look at my career in the Air Force, my health, my relationships with my family and friends, my finances, all those kinds of things, and I pick out the friction points. These are the things I see that I'd like to do better. Like, I lost 30 pounds, I gained back 25 of them. Okay, the closest crocodile to the canoe there is I have to take my fitness test in June, and I need to be able to get an excellent on that. And that creates that gives me the SMART timeline. It gives me specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and timely goals that I can set to meet the goals.
1 week from today, I am running the Phoenix Rock and Roll Half Marathon.
Wow.
And I sign up for this race every single year because it creates that crocodile and that canoe scenario. I know all year that I have to run 13 miles, and I will be dissatisfied with myself if I'm not at a certain level of fitness when I walk into it.
Are you ready?
I am. I am ready for this. I ran 8 miles last weekend, no problem, felt great, could go farther. I ran 5 miles yesterday, felt fantastic. The last couple of weeks I didn't run as much as I wanted to, but the firm got COVID, and so I had to come into work for longer on more days.
Yeah.
Like life happened, but I am ready for it. So
that's great, buddy. I'm proud of you.
Well, this is the thing. Like this is that creates my SMART goal. Is like there's a drop dead date. I paid money to go run this race, and I'm gonna represent myself in a way that is good, and so that keeps me on my game the whole year round.
So that's something psychologists call a commitment device. And it's a sign, like you were saying, of people who are successful in life, who set and achieve goals. They utilize commitment devices to help them achieve those goals. A commitment device could be as simple as an alarm clock. If you don't set it, you're just at the mercy of when you wake up, as opposed to I'm using this external device to remind me of my commitment to get up at this time.
Sometimes.
Yeah, you can hit the snooze button, or you could honor your commitment device.
All right,
and you might not have trained well enough, and now you go out next weekend and you're like, I can't make it the whole 13 miles, or you succeed.
All right, so tangent. Did you ever do this thing as a younger man where you would set your alarm clock, but then you would also set subsequent alarms for so you could deliberately snooze multiple times?
What a morass! What a just horrible, destructive cycle that is. We're like, I know that I'm going to ignore this first alarm, but rather than turn it off, I'm going to set it anyway and plan for what happens after that.
So I was that way when my wife first moved in with me in our apartment in Virginia.
I can just see her crossing her arms across her chest and looking at you and being like, we are not doing this.
It went on for about a week before we had a serious talk about it. But I had in my head the whole thing planned out. Okay, if I get up at the first alarm, I have time to do X, Y, and Z. But if I get up at the second alarm, I still have time to do Y and Z before I go to work. But then if I'm really not feeling it, then I can get up at the third, and then I barely have time to do Y, and then I can still make it.
Okay, so assign a percentage to each of those three scenarios. If that was your status quo before you got married and you were just living the bachelor life, what percent of the time did you get up on Z versus YZ versus XYZ?
Oh, it was probably 10 to 30 to 60, like in that order. Like 10% of the time was XYZ, then 30 YZ, and then 60 would be just Z.
Okay, I could see that being more of a problem if it was like 99 1.1. If that was it, then I could see okay, let's just get real here and only set the one alarm because that's when you're going to get up anyway, as opposed to 10% of the time I'm still doing the full thing. That seems like a viable lifestyle
for a bachelor whose alarm didn't wake up another person.
Okay. But for that, so let's do the math here. So for the 90% of the time that you were hitting snooze or shutting off the first alarm and waiting until the second or third one, it was just annoying that she was getting woken up 90% of the time for no reason.
Yeah, exactly. Well, now we do this fun thing. Oh, I'm just now realizing we're kind of falling into that habit. Not exactly like that, but kind of, where both my wife and I have an idea, this is the time that we're going to get up. But then the night before, we always kind of eyeball each other like, so if we get up at 5, we both have time to run and or work out before we go to work and do all of our normal things. What time are you actually getting up? And we have like that kind of game of chicken.
Oh man, I do this too with my wife. I'll be like, what time are you getting up? And she doesn't want to tell me.
That's probably the best way to go, because then you just take her decision making out of yours. Like, oh, well, she's going to sleep in till 6 because she worked out today. Maybe I should sleep in to 6 too.
Yeah, which is fine if you're going to live your separate lives, but let's say we're going to the same place. It feels like you need to synchronize. Like if you think, okay, we're I don't know, let's just say we're going to church at 9 a.m. tomorrow. We need to get up, get the kids ready, and get out the door by a quarter till, so that means we need to do this amount of stuff. And then we both do our calculation in our head, and then we set a different start time. But we won't tell the other one. So it just looks, whoever gets up first, it looks like the other person's not on board.
Yeah, I can see that, because like exact scenario you're talking about. It's like, oh, we got to get up and go to the zoo, and we both talk about all the things that have to happen before we go to the zoo, but our lists are different. They're mutually exclusive. There are things that she's going to take care of, and there are things that I'm going to take care of. And Ben, I can get ready to go out into the world way faster than my wife can.
Right.
But I still commit to getting up at the same time. But instead, the time that she's spending getting ready, I spend eating a bowl of cereal and watching a YouTube video and just kind of goofing off and slowly easing into the day.
Sure.
Just to show that consolidation. Like, oh, we're still a team. I'm just slacking off this morning. That's all.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that stress. Okay, so I'm going to do like a lightning round of like some of the things I had on my list of stuff where I feel a little bit of the friction. Okay. I'm going to go kind of fast, and then we can just keep a list in your mind of ones we could go back to. Okay. So Professionally, I don't. I'm not feeling really ambitious in my career. There's a lot of stuff I feel like I need to achieve in the next 2 years in the Air Force before I retire. I just want to be in this period where I'm utilizing the skills and experience I have in the past to finish strong in my career. That's the term I would use in air quotes, finish strong. But I do want to set myself up for success in my next career, and there's things I could be doing about that now. Health-wise, I need to pass my PT test. I'd at least like to maintain my current weight. Ideally, I'd like to lose about 15 pounds and stay there instead of yo-yoing up and down, because that's the weight at which my clothes fit best, and I stop getting heartburn, which I think is a worthy goal there. Podcasting. Every year we've podcasted, we've doubled our audience. I'd like to do that again this year.
We have no agency over that other than, hey...
We have a lot of agency over that.
If you like what we do. No, I'll do that later.
I'd also like to do something, a joint event of some sort where we're both at the same place at the same time.
Yay!
I have a couple of ambitious projects that you're really good at doing. I'd like to design a disc golf course for the park near my house and undertake the civic process of perhaps trying to get the city council to approve something or fund something, or I do some fundraising or something like that. But there's a whole lot of nebulous work surrounding all that would make that a really big project to undertake. The house I live in is a rental, but the flower beds are an absolute disaster. I'd like to come up with a plan for revitalizing them, send them to the homeowner, and see if they'll give me some money to buy some mulch and weed block and redo the flower beds. I'm currently enrolled in a university writing course that I signed up for called Writing Creative Nonfiction. I'd like to finish that course with an A and begin the first draft on my book. I'd also like to do another video essay about my car, which is almost done being repainted. I'll talk about that on the podcast next time. Those are all the personal and professional goals. We can pause there before I go to the spiritual, social, emotional, and financial ones.
Please, because I actually have input on these ones.
Okay.
All right, so professionally, you want to finish strong? The only thing that I can say there is there are some things you can probably do to set up for your future career. The number one of those things being networking. It's not what you know, it's who you know. You need to start talking to people, making friends, and just being that guy. I was never that guy. I struggled to break into a new career field. You are that guy. You could have a lot less struggles if you got yourself out there and made people realize that not only one, are you awesome, but two, you're going to be on the job market in the not so near future.
That's so vague in that, since I don't know exactly what job I want, who knows which contact, which opportunity is going to turn out to be the golden one.
There are conferences. There are meetups.
I know all that. I'm not poo-pooing what you said. I agree with you. But it's also I'm burdened with a little bit of sunk cost, because that's one of those, you could do it. There's no ceiling to how much you could do what you're saying. But I'd rather focus my efforts on the right opportunities. But you don't know what the right opportunities are going to be.
Right. And so what you're justifying inaction is what you're doing there.
Yes.
So everything that I'm talking about, I come at it from a computer science perspective. You take the big problem and you break it down to little problems. So if you are suffering from opportunity paralysis, there's so many things that I could do, I don't know what to start with, then pick one. That's what I'd say.
Okay, I feel like I do this. I was on LinkedIn this week. I sent a message to one of my friends who's already out and retired and has a business, and I was like, "Hey man, how'd you make the transition?" He's like, "I got some advice for you." So I'm kind of doing this.
Okay. I would encourage you to come up with some kind of plan to ramp that up as you approach the end of your career. That would be the only thing that I would say. Okay. For your health, your PT test, you gain muscle in the gym, you lose weight in the kitchen. So you need to, I would say, take a hard look at your eating habits and then identify the places where you could probably make small changes that are impacting long term.
I like it. Great. Now, I'm a little bit wary because I'm aware of the emotional transference that has to have for me to give up the comfort of eating the way that I want. But okay.
The only reason that I do any fitness whatsoever is because I like eating the way that I want.
Sure.
There's when I was 20 something, it's because I wanted to look better naked. Now it's because I eat terribly and I don't want to be super, super fat. I'm already kind of fat, but I'm not super fat. So I'm just going to keep going with that.
You're my inspiration. Keep going.
The podcast audience with that just is what it is. We're doing what we can for that. I am not condoning any amount of funding for advertising whatsoever. Don't even ask me. The joint event, dude, I'm on board. Like,
All right, cool. Let's look for the right opportunity and plan it.
It's Vegas and it's magic, and that's what it's going to be.
All right.
We'll have to do a disc golf course run while we're out there at some point.
Yeah.
All right, your disc golf course civic process. All right, so this is something that I would encourage you. It feels like a great opportunity to grab one of your kids and be like, hey, grab by the scruff of the neck. We are doing this. And like assign some of the sub goals to them.
Good. I've already started that.
Excellent. Yeah. Like, hey, we need to, like, step one, how do we even go about this? Who do we need to talk to? And, like, figure that out. Go. That kid's going to learn so much about local government. It's great.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that'll be great. I like it.
Fundraising opportunities. Like, again, break it down into clear steps and just eat the elephant one bite at a time. The flower beds. Disregard. Take that off of your list. That's stupid. Your creative nonfiction. That I didn't know you were taking a creative nonfiction course. I am very curious to hear what that has been like. And drafting a book on top of all of the other things that you're doing seems ludicrous to me as far as how much time that must take. But if that's something that you want to do, there is. I've looked into this before because I've also wanted to write. I've got 2 chapters of a fiction book that I wrote years ago sitting in a drawer next to me. But there is an event I think it's in November, where there is this writing group on the internet, and they set goals for you. It's like, oh, well, just commit yourself to doing this X number of words per day. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad. Don't reread it. Just get them onto paper. And they have, like, you are not the only person that wants to write a book and that has struggled with actually doing it. And so there are communities out there that have developed processes and things that you could get involved with to get some external motivation and an accountability to help you through that process.
Okay. Well, the course has been a good motivator. I've written about a dozen essays, probably 3 of which are high quality, worthwhile publishable. In fact, you mentioned specifically something that had happened to me recently, and I think I'll put it out on my blog and put a link in the show notes.
You have a blog?
Interested in reading? Oh, you've never seen my blog?
Do you live in a world that has 36-hour days or something? Good God, man. Like, how do you get all this done?
Okay, anything else on any of those other goals?
Video essay about your car, just do it. Like, I loved your last video essay. You have such a silky smooth voice when you're trying. It's great.
Yeah, all right, cool. I'm looking forward to it. All right, so the spiritual ones, there's the usual goals of just trying to feel like I'm living my religion in a way where it really is an integrated part into my life so that I feel like I'm authentic about it. That I'm teaching my children, that it's enhancing my relationship with my wife, it's giving me fulfillment and purpose. I have goals about that. We don't need to go into that. However, I am also a seminary teacher, which means I'm trying to help 10, teenagers that are deciding if this is the way they're going to live their life. And I have little frustrations that go along with that. I think any teacher does. You want to feel like you're making a difference in your student's life, and there's little frictions and problems and things that pop up. I'd like to see that improve. Other socially, my marriage, there was a bit that came out in a magazine I saw that was about this guy who was a marriage counselor by profession. And one time he was in the car with his wife, and she said to him, "I still love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore." And he flashed back into his professional life, all the times he heard someone say that, and realized how big of a red flag that was in his own relationship. And didn't realize until that moment that he was in the situation he was giving other people counseling for.
Okay.
He calls it cold gravy. Just something very unappetizing and unappealing because you've let it go.
I like cold gravy.
So in this article, he talks about specifically asking his wife what kind of things he could do to improve with the intent of improving. And so he asked her, and she gave it to him, and he was like, okay, this is mostly a doable list. So after I read this article, let me share this with you. Let's see. After I read this article, I went to my wife and told her about it, and I asked her for my own cold gravy list. So she gave me a list of 6 things that she felt like I could do better. So I wrote them down, and then I went away, and I'm like, okay, what do I need to do here? This one here I need to do daily. This one I just need to take care of one time. This is a monthly thing. This one I need to do all the time. I wrote them all down. And then to me, in order to understand it, I was like, okay, so why do I do it? Why is it important to do this? Because this thing I don't do because it's not important to me, but it's obviously important to her, or she wouldn't have brought it up. So I need to figure out why it's important to her and do it for that reason. And I made all that list and I wrote it down and I started keeping progress and I would check in with her and stuff. And let me tell you, listeners, if you ever want to have a revelation, ask your significant other what you can do to be a better partner. And they will tell you.
Well, and I'm assuming that you have a list for her that.
Okay. So let me say this, and I want to be very clear about this because this is a way I live my life. I have found I'm happier that even if there are things that I want to be reciprocal, if I do not levy that expectation, I'm happier about doing it. So when I went to her with the intent to do this, I didn't say, hey, I want to do this for you, so give me your list, and here's mine. I already prepared it for you.
That makes sense, yeah. Like if you're actually committed to the idea, then it shouldn't be reciprocal as an assumption.
Exactly. And she's never asked me for one. So this is for me. I can be a better husband. That's the list.
Yeah, you're such a terrible person. You should loathe yourself.
I mean, doesn't everybody have something they need to work on in their relationships?
You made a color-coded spreadsheet on how you can be a better husband. Yeah, you're such a terrible person. Ben.
You know, I'd like to feel more affection and closeness, and the vicissitudes of life bring a bit of distance, especially here in the new year. I've really felt it keenly this year as we've just gone back into the grind. We racked up a bit of debt over the holidays. We got some weight. It's just like she's doing the work. She's finally got a regular job for the first. Not finally. She has a regular job for the first time in our marriage, where she isn't at home with the kids. So she's focused on that. And then there's the after school activities and the work and the exercise and the hobbies and stuff. And it just feels like we're going different directions. It's a common marriage dilemma. How do you keep the flame alive?
Wow. That's honestly, that's great. And I'm glad that you identified that and that you took action to make it better.
Fatherhood, goals surrounding fatherhood. I'm right in a very critical time where I'm about to launch another 2 more young adults out into the world. I want that to transition to go smoothly and successfully. I want to make sure the other 3 that are still at home are also prepared for their transition. I want to have a good relationship with them, set them up for success. And then friends. There's my relationship with you and other friends that I maintain. There's also, I moved to a new place and I got some friends that perhaps due to COVID, I haven't reached out as much as I like. And maybe I'd want to have them over for dinner or have a game night or something like that. That's just been on the back burner. Financially, I know you're like not a certified financial planner, but we racked up some debt over the holidays that I'd like to knock out. It's feasible to do it before the end of the year if I'm responsible, but there's always things that pop up. If the transmission on the truck feels like it's going out, I got 3 kids going off to college. I want to improve at Magic. We've talked about how that has its my psychological limitations where I've just reached my peak performance unless I change something fundamental. I want to get better at disc golf. I've been really putting a lot of effort into that, and that's about it.
Okay. I mean, there's a lot there. There's a whole lot there. Talking about, you're taking responsibility for seniors in high school for their spiritual development, and taking that on yourself. Like, that's just crazy to me. Absolutely crazy. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, Ben.
Okay, let me give you an example. This is my second shot at doing this. I did it 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, and the students that I taught 3 years ago are now graduated from high school and on into college. And there was one family where I had twin sisters. Now, I don't believe that these outcomes are indicative of their spirituality, so take this with a grain of salt. But one of them is now currently serving a mission for the church, and the other one has left the church. They were twin sisters that were both in my class. I don't feel any accountability for that. I feel like we had our experience together. I gave them what I invested in them in time and effort, and then they chose their life outcome. I don't feel like a failure with the one. I don't feel like I was necessarily responsible for the success of the others. I still want to feel like I'm putting effort into providing a good experience for them for that hour we spend together every day.
Okay. I have nothing to add to that.
Okay.
Instead, I'm going to actually take a step back, and I think one of, not a problem, but an issue that I would bring up with you is that your list of things that you want to improve in your life is longer than the top 10 list of resolutions that people make for themselves in general.
Okay.
You have,
Go ahead.
You have limited resources. Specifically in this scenario, the most limited resource is time. I don't understand how you accomplish half the crap you accomplish in the first place. So my recommendation to you would be to prioritize which ones of these are the most important to you and focus on them, and not get them,
I love it.
Not get them solved, but like make the changes in your life, or make active steps, take the steps to make these long-lasting changes to the things that are most important to you. And then once you've achieved that, or once you feel like you no longer need to put in effort into them, that they're at a sustainable level, then work on some of the other ones.
I love it. Okay, give me a number. I'll make a list and I'll send it to you, and you can give me like I don't know, veto power over it.
I'm not going to
take the flower beds off. Take the flower beds of the rental off the list. Okay, I can do that.
Or put them on somebody else's list. Do you have a 14-year-old that needs a civics lesson? There you go.
Yeah. Nice.
Dude, good things come in threes, right? Like, prioritize this list. Pick the top 3 that are most important to you.
Wow.
Figure out a good plan of action that you're going to implement. And once you get them to a sustainable level, pick the next 3.
Okay. Now, it's funny you gave that little diatribe about me, because I also have admiration for you and what you live in your life. Like, you say how I don't know how you have all the time, but I look at you and you're constantly sending me, cool outings. You're going on with the kids and you got them involved in extracurricular activities. You're doing home improvement projects. You're always on some like woodworking or metalworking craft. I mean, you've always got something going on. You're training for a half marathon. You're getting your CPA. You're not stagnant.
No, but it's always the outsider's perspective that you need to remind you of that. Because to me, everything you're talking about, that's just the routine. This is the stuff that I'm churning away at. And the improvements that I want to make are all going back to kind of the same thing. Because I always want more time. I want more time to spend doing the things I want to do. I want more time to spend with my kids. I want more time to spend with my wife. I want more time to sit around doing nothing by myself. Yes, I will say that. I'm a selfish bastard. I'm sorry. But
sounds like you need a time machine.
No, I need larger return on investment in specific portions of my life, like professionally. If I was able to make more money, then I could pay for services where I wouldn't have to worry about certain things. If I wanted to get rid of some of the chores in my house, I could have our cleaning service come every week instead of every other week. Simple things like that. That's how I'm personally kind of tackling the time problem, because time is money. So if I get more money, theoretically I should be able to turn that into more time somewhere.
Okay, I love it. I love your input that I just need to simplify, because along the vein of the leadership strategy I despise of why do you hate nuclear surety, I've had this problem with my resolutions every year. I make this exhaustive list that I can't possibly keep up with and mostly just set myself up for failure. My wife likes to avoid the whole thing entirely and really has a lot of friction with this on me, because she doesn't like to tell me the stuff she thinks she wants to do, because she's afraid that, then I'll force her to try to do it. And so she just thinks them. And, if they work out, great. And if they don't, at least I'm not a failure.
Yeah. Well, you should, marriage should be number 1, period. So,
okay.
And then the rest I leave up to you. What do you think is most important in your life?
All right. Okay. I'll send you what I think my list is. And I like, and I appreciate your input, my friend. Now, along the lines of just maintaining the routine, here on the Bad at Magic podcast, from time to time, we occasionally review books. And it's been a while since we've done one, so I think we need to do one again.
Excellent.
So in the month of February, that'll give our our listeners some time if you want to join in. There's a book out by author Andy Weir, author of The Martian. I read that book. I loved it. It's this beautiful mix of fiction and real science that just makes it enjoyable and propels you along. This book is something having to do with the moon. I don't know a lot about it, but I'm kind of glad. We'll read it together and review it sometime in February. It's called Artemis.
You picked a science fiction book. I'm so proud of you.
It'll be great.
Yeah, I might actually enjoy listening to it, hopefully.
This one's read by Rosario Dawson, who has some great street cred. I think she plays a character in several of the Netflix Marvel properties. She's the nurse that puts Daredevil back together.
A mixed bag when actors try to do voice acting, because voice acting is a very different animal.
All right, well, we'll see.
Excellent. Well, in the meantime, if you like what we talk about, consider sharing us with a friend. If you like what we talk about, maybe your friends will like us too. If you really want to help us out, consider taking your phone out of your pocket right now and giving us a good review on the podcast player of your choice. It is unbelievable the visibility we get on that. And lastly, if you want me to heckle Ben about him trying to be a better person, even though he's the best person already, for the rest of our natural lives, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
And if you listen to this discussion day and you felt like you had something to add to the discussion, or you want to join in, you can go on our subreddit and join in the thread discussion for this episode, or you can go on our Facebook page, or you can go on our website and send us an email, or whatever you want to do. We want to hear from you. And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.